know what I want, so I'll take it on. I've made mistakes, but mistakes make you strong. Let's break it down for a minute. I want the crown, I'm gon' get it. You hear me loud, man, I'm winning. Yeah, Charlie Sheen will be grinning. These ladies know that I'm sinning, and this is just the beginning. I'm closing in the night getting. There ain't no point in resisting. Living life like a dream, live it right, that's the thing. Every night got a team, I've been tied to the scene. Out on stage, hear them scream, okay, it's a dream. And I pray as a team, one day it'll be me. If I want it, then I'll get it. Head down, don't regret it. Push myself to the limit. If I play it, then I win it. I'm just saying, I'm just living for today. For a minute, I don't stay, I just visit. Have no shame, I admit it. Looking on me to see if I succeed, to see if I believe. They're looking up to me. They want the best of me now, best of me now, best of me now, best of me. They want the best of me now, best of me now, best of me now, best of me. They want the best of me now. Swear to God, man, I'ma make it soon. Silence all the haters as they see us making moves. I do what I want, so I got nothing to prove. Staying motivated, teaching others what to do. I'm staying focused, my mind is open. They start to notice that I'm in motion. There is no potion, you're not just chosen. It takes devotion to stay composed, man. Never stop, there ain't no time to fall. Try to live, get it all. You got one life to ball. Thinking big, never small, cause you gotta want it all. When you finally get that call, you get ready, take it on. Need a hand out, I already stand out. Starting to advance now, ready to expand now. You don't have a chance now, cause we're in demand now. Make it by the grand now, feeling in command now. They're looking right at me to see if I succeed, to see if I believe. They're looking up to me. They want the best of me now, best of me now, best of me now, best of me. They want the best of me now.
All right, what's going on, everyone? Thanks for joining us today. An interview hangout session that's been in the works for like 6 months now. Dude, I'm glad we're here, man. Thanks for being here with me.
Oh, good, man. I think we started talking about this over cigars in like Vegas.
Yeah, and that's actually today. Earlier, I rewatched the interview panel you were on with James Hunter, Dakota, and that was that whole panel was where I got this inspiration. And then when we had cigars in Vegas, I was like, dude, we have got to do an author chat and talk about this.
Yeah.
So I'm excited.
It was a really, really interesting panel. I mean, not just because I was both hungover and drunk at the same time, but but like just the topics themselves were really fascinating.
Yeah, and that's where it's one of those things, like panels can be great because you can feed off of other authors. But there's times where when you really want to dive into a topic, you have to share the time with 4 other authors. Yeah.
And occasionally, well, so it can be really good sometimes because it's like, I know nothing about this. Do you? Oh, thank God.
Yeah. You know, I totally agree with what Ben's saying down there. Yeah, that's my point.
Yeah. Matt Dinneman, he's said everything that needs to say. I don't need to elaborate any further. This is fine. Yeah. We're in total agreement. That's my position right there. Thank God.
Or you could totally shill your book if you haven't read that person's. Like, you know, I took a completely different approach than his, but that's why you'll see it once you get into my book. Like, oh my gosh, what is that?
Well, there's actually part of a reason you use your books instead of someone else's. Like, you remember high school creative writing, and it's like, what did the author mean by the blue in the curtains in the scene here? And it's like it was used to describe like depression and just the sense of overwhelming loss they had in the scene. And you go and do that on stage thinking that, oh yeah, I think like Matt did this great scene where this happened, this happened, this happened. And then Matt turns to you and goes, the fuck I
did? What book were you reading? That wasn't mine.
Yeah. Look, the guy's wearing boxers and crushing hamsters with his bare feet because it's weird. There's nothing more in there.
Yeah. So with those conversations, the panel that came up, it was a lot based around magic systems and how you approach that. And so that was where, for those of you who are going to tune in or watch this later, I really loved some of your comments about that. And I was curious about your approach. So I wanted to give you the time to come and talk about that. So I guess my first question to lead into this chat, what do you think most people get wrong when they start out building their magic system or even the game mechanics within their system?
I think what most people get wrong from the starting position with their system would definitely be the fact that they think that the system is centered around their protagonist. So the system or the game mechanics and everything like that has absolutely nothing to do with their protagonist. Their protagonist is being like, think about it like this. You drop a guy in England in the 1200s. England's doing its own thing. England has castles. England has knights. England's got all sorts of things going on. England isn't about your main character. So neither should your system be about your main character. You go, how does your character interact with the system? So what you want to know is, am I dropping the character into the right environment? Like, so not just when I build my system, is I have to build the right system for the story I want to tell with this character. So I can drop my character in like 1200 England. I can drop them in Rome 500 BC. 200 BC. I can drop them in modern day France. I can drop them in New Zealand 200 years from now. And it's a burnt out wasteland of nuclear war and apocalypse.
Yeah.
But the main thing everyone gets wrong when they start with lit RPG is they come from this point of, oh, I have this character and I want the system to support the character. And what you really want is the character to support the system. Unless it's power fantasy in which you've got an OP main character. The reason why is because you want your character to be an interesting person who's exploring the system and just finds it cool. Like Elrond Kong did this really well with the land. Like everything in there was just cool and fun, and him exploring his character Richter and exploring new things just kept pulling you and go, oh, this is interesting. Oh, this is interesting. And yeah,
the system itself in the land was almost as vast as the world itself.
Yeah. And like one of the things I thought that was kind of cool about that was there seemed to have like regional fixtures with like the system. Like, oh, this kingdom has access to like these skills, this technology, and they're doing that. Oh, there was this other like group 3,000 years ago. They were way more advanced. They're now in this realm, and you're like, okay, cool, and like just the fact that there were parts that like he was accessing the edges of, but it just wasn't about him. That made it really interesting.
So,
whereas
sorry, go ahead.
Whereas if your system's there to make your character look good and look powerful, it feels quite hollow a lot of the time.
Yeah, that's a great point. So this is actually going to lead into a question I have later on, but as you're talking about it, I mean, let's kind of go into this. You know, the writer thinks the system should complement the main character. When we talk about like classic writing skills, you really want conflict, whether it's conflict within a group, conflict within the environment. So do you kind of look at that also as like there's opportunities for the main character to have a conflict within the system?
There is. Well, so it depends on what type of book you want to write. So in my Unorthodox Farming series, I have a farmer in battle scenes, and he's just thrown a spear at a troll's eye. A pitchfork, to be correct. He's thrown a pitchfork at a troll's eye, and he's upgraded his pitchfork skill, handling skill, because he's like saved his life with a pitchfork. At no point does a farmer really have a life-threatening situation that would cause him not to like it'd be dangerous to show a giant prompt right in front of his face. So he's in the middle of what is a life and death situation. The system's like, yeah, farmers don't get in these. It's all good. Send him prompt, send him prompt, send him prompt, send him prompt, send him prompt. And it's like he's in a smoky room, barn. He's got a giant troll trying to kill him, and he's got these prompts that just keep coming in his face, and he's like, "Oh, yeah, this is frustrating." So you can do conflict in situations like that, but when you like do something like Vampire Vincent, which is OP main character, you're not really supposed to have conflict with the system in that story, because with an overpowered character, especially when you're using a system, the system is never really the conflicting point because they're so overpowered. And if the system was conflict, how the heck did they get overpowered in the first place?
Yeah, that's a good point. And if I remember correctly, when you were talking about your vampire and loot at the panel, you said how, you know, your main character had to basically rely on the system in the balancing act with society.
Yeah.
So that's another way that you can kind of add it. It's a third dimension, I guess, of just creating complexity of how you want to balance that out. And so I guess that leads into the next question of where exactly do you find the right balance so that you meet all of the different complexities of the story?
So you actually want to take a couple of steps back. So you first want to decide on what type of story you're telling, because like lit RPG is a new genre. We're still trying to work out how all the genre conventions work, what types of stories you can tell in this, and how you can tell them. Like Honor is amazing because, like, in my opinion, she's the first one to have gotten card-based lit RPG right. Like it's a fantasy story. It's got cards. It's believable. It's immersive. You feel like you're in a world, and it's like, oh, this is a good example of how this is done. And so you need to, like, a lot of the time writers are running around going, how do we do this? Do we do it this way? And we're just trying to like guess at things. So back to my original point I was meant to be making. When you go back to the start, you have to go, what kind of story do I want to tell? Is my character going to be sort of rags to riches or no power to all power? Or are they going to be low power to mid power? And you've got to work out kind of the arc for the entire series. And because that will tell you what your system does and where your system fits in and how much to put in when. So to give an example, in my unorthodox farming series, there is a max amount of an attribute you can have. So the system maxes out that there is like, oh, this is as powerful as you can possibly get. We can't do anything more. There is a limit to the system. Whereas in the unorthodox farming series, Vampire Vincent series, there really isn't that limit. So it's like there is no max level. There's like, oh, there's the max level you can get on this planet because, like, once you've out-leveled everything, there's nothing else you can kill to get stronger.
Yeah.
But like, there isn't a max level really, and so because of that, each system can take you a different direction, and the system you have to build based on this for the characters is different. So in unorthodox farming, the interesting thing about that system is it's a slow burn system. It is a system that's designed, you do not change your class over your lifetime. Maybe one in like 100 people in their entire lives get to max level and get a second class. The system is not designed for you to jump around and be all powerful. I mean, everyone manipulates the system in order to try to do that.
Yeah.
But that's how the system is designed. So it's like, okay, you're going to max out level 60 by the time you die in your class if you're a normal person. And there's a lot of benefits to that. But also that's kind of where your max is. Whereas the Vampire Vince is like, look, if you survive enough fights, you are a god.
Yeah.
And it's, what is it? It's one of those things like, you also have to decide what kind of like power scale, as in like your characters have. What was the series? The Immortals? Was that the one about the vampires in New Orleans?
Oh, I don't know.
I can't
must
remember.
have been an older movie.
No, it's a TV series. It was based off.
Oh, then I definitely haven't seen it.
Okay. Well, so it came after, sadly, the Vampire Diaries. Didn't watch the Vampire Diaries, watch this. But you have this scene in that show, like one of the first episodes, where the vampire gets just angry with everyone and just blurs in. And you see like 5 people in the room drop dead. And he's holding like a human heart. And he's literally ripped the heart out of everyone. And so that gives you an understanding of power scale. And so for like the Vampire Vincent, that was Vincent's starting level. And so you're looking at, okay, people can do this in this world. This is like what high level of power looks like. So when you're building a system like that, you have to build a system that builds towards that, but also supports that as a possibility.
So I guess with that, then, how do you? I guess it really decides where do you want to go with this. Like, where do you want room to grow? Because if you're going to be using that, like, okay, the end game is for him to get to here or accomplish this thing. So how do I space this out?
Oh, okay. So that's something that people think. I worked this out recently. Like, I write good lit RPG and terrible cultivation novels. And I worked out why I write terrible cultivation novels and good lit RPG. In my lit RPG, the leveling is a result of the character doing something else. They're in the pursuit of a goal, and they just happen to level at the same time because of it. Except for Arnold, he's trying to level, but he's trying to do it in an unorthodox method. So if your character's only goal is, oh, I'm going to get power, it gets really wearing. Like it tires you out as a reader, and it's unrelatable. Because what is it? One of the things about like the reason, like what is it? The reason why we don't like people who pursue power is because the pursuit of power, like, is not like fundamentally right. We know it instinctively. Oh, someone who wants power, they probably shouldn't have it. The people who get power naturally, they go and do something, they get really good at it, and then all these people are like, how are you doing this? And they follow them, and they just get better at it. And so it's like someone who, okay, Brandon Sanderson, the man has a giant like company now. He's got lots and lots of work. There's all these people are following. He's built up power as a writer, but he's built up power as a writer because he's just pursued writing, and he's not pursued the power that comes with it. So it's like we look and go, oh, here's this giant company. You can do all these things. It's like, that's cool. But he didn't go after the power. He went after the writing. And so the power came as an accidental result of that. And we want the same thing in lit RPG, the same thing in cultivation. You want the character to be pursuing something else, and then the power comes at the same time. I mean, if you're doing a long form series, if you're doing a long form series, you can do one book where it's like, oh, I really need to train. There is a war coming next year, and this is like, oh, this is all about surviving the war. And so you can do the full training montage, getting stronger, all that sort of stuff. But if the only thing the character cares about is getting powerful, it's interesting for a little bit. Then you find like readers start getting bored at book 2, book 3, because they're like, oh, there's actually nothing else to this guy. He has He has like one interest. Like all he wants to do is like go to the gym and get big.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's the frustrating thing I had with Bloodbath, right? My first person shooter series.
Yeah.
And what's funny was, I had to have the cap in there, and I actually explained it where it's like, hey, once you get to like level 50, you cannot progress because we don't want a super soldier who's going to get a god form and go against our orders. But then two, you are still a human being that have human limits to you.
Yep. Yeah.
So, we can't have you burn out the physical body you have. And what was funny was I wrote book 1, book 2, and then straight into book 3. I hated writing book 3. I myself as a writer got tired of it. Yeah. But my editor was like, dude, I hated book 1 and 2 because of the main character. But in book 3, I saw exactly why you did it, how you did it. And book 3 is now my favorite. And it all works well. And I'm like, well, okay, fine.
Yeah. But it only took three books for the editor to get it.
Well, yeah, I was like, character arc does not mean that the arc ends in one book. You extend it out because of these, hey, all of these pieces need to fall in place.
Yeah.
But yeah, the same thing is even when some readers get tired of your character, so you as the writer can as well.
Oh yeah. I mean, you're the character's bouncing around in your head, going, "Oh, I'm doing this, I'm doing that," and you're going, "Okay, how are you doing this?" And you're sitting there going, "Okay, when I'm sitting there writing like Arnold, I'm going, you are emotionally immature. You are not self-reflective. You have never really dealt with your issues in life. How does this affect you?" And I'm just like, "Oh dear God, this would like." For a normal person, losing your family, that sucks. For someone who's like just pushing everything down, it's like, this is too hard to deal with. It's like, oh, this is bad. This is bad. This is not pleasant. And you're going through like how those people think, and you're like, yeah, this is really unhealthy. And like, how do they feel in this situation? Oh God, that's a horrible feeling. And you get tired of that. Whereas if you have a fun, whimsical character, it's like, you don't get tired, but you get annoyed with them, I would say. So you're like, oh, this guy takes everything as a joke, which is fun. But you're just like, God, I wish this person was more mature.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And, you bring up a great point where I've talked about this before. Depending on where your story is, and especially in lit RPG, we have this unique thing where you can normally take someone from one setting and you get to put them in a completely different setting. So at what point in life are you using this character? Because if you have them very young, then everything that they're experiencing should be a new experience for them to absorb. Yeah. If they're really old, okay, we should have a lot of reflection of like, this reminds me of stuff. So you have to learn where to balance it out.
And why you want to put that person there. Exactly. Yeah. And also what type of person they were, because you can have someone who is very old. So recently I wrote First Line of Defense 2, which a lot of people are upset with me because I changed the main character, that one.
Oh no.
Yeah. So that the First Line of Defense.
Spoiler, because I haven't read the second one.
So the First Line of Defense is my artistic series.
It's so good, dude.
Oh, thanks. It's going to be like the first book's told from Morgan's point of view. The second one is told from Nicholas's point of view, with chapters still from Morgan, and the third one is told from from Theodore's point of view as the main character, with chapters from Nicholas and Morgan. And then the second trilogy starts with just Morgan's book again. But
oh, wow.
Yeah, because the First Line of Defense is an organization that is the first line of defense for humanity. And they sort of explain why humanity's in the game. Mm-hmm. And this isn't spoilers because this is chapter 1. But Nicholas in book 2 is a character who is in his 80s. He lost his wife when he was younger. And he never remarried. He never had children. And his mother has Alzheimer's, and she's in her late 90s. And for the last 6 months, he's been going and visiting her in the rest home like every couple of days because she's his last link to the world. So he's a man that when he gets his health back, when he gets his youth back, is very regretful of a lot of things, and he has a lot of things he never like made peace with. Whereas I've got a character, Theodore in book 3, who's even older, but he was someone who made peace with almost everything in his life except for one thing. And he is, I kind of think of him as like Captain Jack Harkness from Doctor Who.
Okay.
He is up to go on an adventure, except imagine that just like with like ADHD, short attention span. Oh, let's try this. Oh, let's try this. Oh, let's try this. It's like, I'm going to start a corporate headquarters. Cool. We have competition over there. They're hitting us in the market, sir. What do? We're going to invade their headquarters and shoot everyone.
Heck yeah.
Yeah, it's like, sir, that's not business. They can't stop us. We have more androids than they do.
Yeah. Well, it's funny you say that too, because that was actually one of my questions I was going to, and we just naturally lead into it. That's why I love our author chats. When the main character needs to grow and develop within a world, but even that can have a play in it when we see characters that are reincarnated or begin all over again. So how do you approach that? Which you kind of talked about where, hey, this guy has a lot of reflection on life and now wants to do things differently.
Yeah. And when you're looking at character growth, you have to decide whether or not your character grows. Because you don't actually... There are some books where you don't actually have to show character growth. One of the things writers will tell you is, everyone has to have character growth. Superman basically never had character growth. You gave him like near godlike power, so you have to have his character down, because if that man fails to live up to like what he should be, half a country disappears. And so like a small tantrum from Superman is like, oh yeah, I clapped my hands so hard, I destroyed New York City because they annoyed me. And so like you have to decide whether or not you want character growth. And if, over a long series, you don't have to have character growth every book. Like you can sort of do a couple of books where your character's growing, do 3 books of consistent character, and then do some change in their life. And sadly, it's not something that's actually been done in lit RPG yet. My favorite series personally is Dresden Files. And so like the first 3 books of that is you've got him building up a relationship with a woman, and at the end of the 3rd book, she becomes a vampire. She runs away. She goes off to have a new life. So then you've got a book of, oh my gosh, my girlfriend got turned into a vampire because I dragged her into things that were dangerous. I'm not in a good place. So you've got sort of like 3-book arc then of, I'm building myself back up. And then it's like at the end of that, it's like, we're introducing a brother now. And so you've got a 3 arc of what does it mean to have a brother? And they're not huge changes. And he's actually, okay. So I'll go off on a little tangent right now. The more power you give your character at the beginning, the more put together they have to be. Because if someone is emotionally unstable, if they are unhappy with life, they're easy to easily angered, and they're violent and all that, and then you give them Captain America or Superman like powers, the natural progression in a lot of these cases is just, I'm going to become a bully and I'm going to become an asshole. And so depending on like where the power scale starts for your character depends on where the maturity has to be at. So if like, even if you have them level 1, if the power scale from level 1 to 10 is Captain America, and they're one of the only people who get this like power scale, they have to have some level of maturity. Otherwise, they're kind of like, they'll turn into a cackling villain very easily. Because a lot of the time, it's like, we don't know how strong we are when we do things, especially like when things change very quickly. Like it takes us about 8 years, pretty much, as like from like birth to 8-year-old, to understand how strong we are and like how we use our strength. Because kids will go to push each other all the time, and they'll push too hard. They'll go, "Oh, what the heck just happened here?"
Yeah.
And we'll do this as adults if we suddenly got way stronger. And
well, that's even like we see it in nature with like a rattlesnake. You know, if you get bit by an infant snake, it'll inject more venom in you than an adult because it doesn't know. And so that is an interesting perspective on that, where I'm sure there's plenty of times where you could play with that as far as an MC who's like, oh man, what exactly does this do? Holy shit, I just blew up the tavern. My bad. Now the town is pissed at me.
Well, it's not just that. It's just like you have him get in a disagreement with a guy in a bar after like leveling 5 times. Doesn't know what it's like. And it's just this peasant being a dick. And so like he shoves the guy because the guy's getting in his face. And the guy goes flying across the room and breaks like 8 bones.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's one of these things that like you have to make sure your character is the right type of person to give this power to. Because if you want, like one of the things you always want to present as a writer is an authentic character, an authentic setting, and authentic side characters. Because as a reader, we need to believe that this world you've created is real for us. Otherwise, we can't care about the characters. And so if the characters aren't authentic to us, like if you have this like hot-headed, angry character who's just like upset at the world, easily like set off by everything, and then he gets really, really powerful, and he doesn't say, you know what, I'm just gonna do a firebolt in this tavern. Yes, I don't always hit my target, but I'm gonna do it. And then he firebolts the dude, misses his target. The guy jumps inside, hits the wall of alcohol behind the bar, and now the bar's on fire.
Yeah.
So handling power is a very, very difficult thing to do. And it's, for a lot of writers, it's where we make the biggest mistake. The best answer to this I've ever heard is all power has a purpose. So that's one of the fundamental truths. You used that quite a
bit on that panel too. So that's what I really liked.
Yeah. It's one of the fundamental truths of our world. It's like every weapon that's ever been made has been made with a purpose in our world. And so if your character gets power in a fantasy world, that power has a purpose. There is a purpose behind why all this is happening. And you've got to make sure that's built into the system, and you've got to understand why it's there.
Mm-hmm. I love that, man. I love that.
Yeah.
Let's go to Kyle, who has a question for us. And granted, for those of you who don't know, Ben is on his phone, so he can't really see some of the comments just because they're microtext. But Kyle asks, Benjamin, what drew you to write a character made into a farmer?
Well, so most of my book ideas start as something else. Unorthodox farming. Okay. Yeah. Unorthodox farming originally started as like an old farmer who like was having problems with goblins and told the Adventurers Guild to come out and kill the goblins for him. And the Adventurers Guild were like, no, we don't have anyone to spare. So the old farmer got angry, killed the goblins himself, and ended up getting like warrior experience. And he's like, what the hell am I doing with this? And then it goes to the market to like sell it, and was like, wait, this is worth how much? Sells it, and he's like, goes off and buys farming experience, and he's like, this is way more effective than farming. And so you ended up with like this old man murder hobo farmer who was going and like doing it like warrior adventure and shit to level his farming class, because like the exchange rate on warrior experience to farming experience was like great.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, so that was the original idea, and somehow as I'm writing, like I tried to write that book, and like it fell apart within like 2 chapters. And this is I try a lot of books and a lot of ideas, and they generally fall apart pretty quickly. It's not until I get to the last chapter I'm like, oh, it's done. That was an okay story. Then I'm like, cool, I'm onto something. I can get like 60,000 words into a book and be like, oh, this was a total mistake. I really shouldn't have done this. Okay, good luck next time. And
you'll just scrap 60,000 words?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, dude.
Yeah. So there is the book I see in my head that is absolutely awesome, and then it's the book that ends up on the page. And when reality kicks in, I'm like, wow, this is terrible. I've just come to accept, okay, my first drafts of thing can just be like thrown out, because like the idea does not work. Because of this, I've got to the point of I don't add description. I don't add like intense characterization on my first pass, because I don't know whether or not I'm keeping the chapter or if I'm keeping the book. So like if I ever get to a point where I'm writing it, I'm like, no, that's too hard. I just do brackets, describe shop, carry on.
Yeah.
So
you're not the first writer I've heard who has done that. So I've heard of others who have done that.
Yeah. Well, because sometimes you think something's important to the story, and you get to the end of the book and you go back and read through and go, oh, that's not the moral of the story at all. That part there was not important. I am going to either cut it or I'm going to change it to make it important. And you don't always know what's like that. But anyway, back to the guy's original question, why did I write a story about a farmer? So I was writing about the old farmer, that didn't work. And the idea kept bouncing around in my head. And I was like, one day I sort of just like woke up and I was like, it would be really funny if you had like a gamer isekai. And it's like, he can be a wizard, he can be a barbarian, he could be like all the cool stuff. And he gets stuck as a farmer. And I was just like, just the conflict there of like putting a gamer into a farming simulator. Basically, he's playing Farmville. And that's what for me was
like,
really.
When I heard the title, I was like, that's immediately what I thought of.
Yeah. And because of that, like, I found it really intriguing. And it was during lockdowns in New Zealand for COVID. COVID had just started up. And okay, so COVID had just started up in New Zealand. The whole country went into lockdowns for, I think it was 8 to 10 weeks the first time. Because we have a water border, it was easy to stamp it out. Well, we could stamp it out in the country, and then life could carry on as normal. I was like, it's way too stressful to try finish off this book I've been writing for 2 years. I'm going to write a lit RPG novel. So I wrote a apocalypse lit RPG novel about a kid at fat camp. Yeah. And so that was absolutely terrible. Like it was, it's a crime against literature. Like,
is this book still available? And where do I get it?
So it's a crime against literature and should never see the light of day. I worked out about a year after I wrote it why the story didn't work. And that's because I didn't lean into the funny and the fact that the guy would do anything for a Klondike bar. Like, if I had written that story, I think it would have been amazing. Like, you just have this really like fat teenager saving the world because like Twinkies and Snickers bars are like running out of stock, and he will do anything to get what's left of them.
Yeah. Oh, like, well, yeah. That kind of makes me think of Zombieland, right? Like, I just damn Twinkie. Yeah. So anyway, we're captured by aliens. You're sending us to another alien planet. You want us to blow up that, but you'll give me unlimited Twinkies? Fuck yeah, where's my gun?
Yeah. Pretty much. I got this. Don't worry. Yeah. So that was a crime against literature and should never see the light of day. And I was looking over it at the end. It's like, that was 85,000 words when I finished. And I was like, it would be way easier to write a new book than fix this monstrosity. And so then I started writing Unorthodox Farming. And that started off as very close to what the final book was. And I just liked the idea of this like gamer that was stuck in his mind. It produced instant conflict, and it sort of was the thing that like pushed him forward the whole time. Plus, at the same time, when I was writing it, I I've been reading a lot of isekai novels with lit RPG, as you do, and I was quite frustrated by the fact that no one had ever approached what it's like to lose all your family and friends at once. I remember meeting a guy years ago, and he had lost a large portion of his family in a terrorist attack, and it was a fun event, everything. And then this bomb went off, killed a bunch of his family, and like he was happy he had a life then, but it was still something he carried with him years later, and you could see it when he talked about it. And like, it's just not something a lot of people ever have to deal with, losing everything, and that would be just so overwhelming and so like painful. I realized I wanted to show that properly. And so like the first 3 books of Unorthodox Farming is really him coming to terms with the loss of everything. And book 1, if you read it, it's really just a suicide note. It's like, I've been thrown in this world, I've been thrown in this horrible class, and I don't care if I live or die. I'm either going to be a millionaire or I'm going to die trying. And at the end of the book, he's like,
to lose.
Yeah. He's like, at the end of the book, he's like, oh my God, I didn't die and I made it. Shit, now I have to put my life back together.
Oh.
Now comes the hard part. Yeah.
Yeah. Man, it's so fun when you really get to use that in literature of like the balance of life. Like, I get to live out all the things I would love to do of I'm going to go ride a motorcycle 100 miles an hour and do this. And I broke all these bones and I can live through my character. And then it's like, oh, but now that character's got to heal. Now that character's got to,
Yeah. They've got to go through repair. They've got to like be a human basically. Because like you can be physically invincible, but if you don't feel invincible, you're going to have to deal with that.
Yeah. Well, it's, that was an interesting part that I did with Bloodbath where, I mean, spoiler alert for all those who have not read it, which is only like 20 people, but there's times where the main character basically dies almost or, gets on that verge of death. And you realize like, even though he's the main character of the story, it doesn't mean like he's the main superhero of the whole group. And it really takes a team. And there's 1 or 2 times where he's like, I fucked that up. And the side character's like, you did. You're fucking new, dude. Like you had grenades, you had this. Why didn't you use your tools? So.
Yeah. So Unorthodox Farming, when I first wrote the first book, it ended up being 105,000 words. So I underwrite because I leave things out as I'm going. Because I don't know if I'm going to keep things or not. And in the first edition of Unorthodox Farming, great. I was reading Canada's Farmer. You've read the book?
I haven't actually.
Oh, okay. So
that's where I only did First Line of Defense with you.
Okay.
And the one reason I did that was because at first I was like, what are authors' first books? And I'll read that. And then it was like, wait a minute, if they've done 20 books, if I read their most recent, that's 20 books of experience. So
yeah. So all my series are a little bit different. Unorthodox Farming, more dealing with emotions, bit of fun. First Line of Defense, the first book, is total fun. The second book, however, is a deep, depressing book about like dealing with. Anyway, back to what I was originally saying. So when I first wrote Unorthodox Farming, it's 105,000 words. At the very end, the whole book is about him basically working out as a farmer. If you lure monsters to your farm and then hobo kill them in your barn, you get experience for defending your farm. So you get farming experience for killing monsters because you're basically chasing away the wolves as a farmer.
Right.
Yeah. And so he's like, how big of a scale can I do this on? And as he's sort of ramping up, he manages to attract a giant to the village. So you've got this like 50-foot monstrosity like walking towards the village, and he's like terrified, and the village is terrified, and then everyone's happy because like, look, we now know there's a giant here. We can go tell the Adventurers Guild to come kill it. No one's coming to kill it. Oh crap. Okay, so we have to either abandon the entire village, or can we kill this thing with one of your like Kevin McAllister traps? So you've literally got like 80,000 words of, can you build a trap big enough for a giant? And it ends up being they make a giant water reservoir. They cover it with like netting and camouflaging, and they're trying to lure the giant to go over the walk into the trap basically and just get trapped in this giant reservoir. And the original plan was him, like in the first iteration of the book, was him running out, throwing like a spear at the giant, getting its attention, and then like gapping it with higher stats and a whole bunch of skills across like the village, and like this thing chasing after him, and him like running across the netting and stuff because it could support his weight because it had to, and like him luring the giant to where it needed to go. And I got to the end of the book and I was just like, that is so stupid. He should be dead. There is no way he pulls this off. If this thing is like as dangerous of stead, and like you need high level adventurers to come in and kill him, there is no way in hell this dude kills this thing. And so I went back and rewrote the book, and I rewrote it with the idea the trap worked. And you get to the end of the book, and the giant has fallen the hole, and he's disappointed. He's disappointed because he's done all the things that were necessary for baiting the giant, and like, so he's basically destroyed his build under the concept of, I'm going to have to run away from a giant at one point with like a cloak of like monster taunting on my shoulders, and I'm going to have to weave through monsters and everything like. So I'm going full speed. That's my entire build. And so he watches this giant fall in his trap, and it's just like, oh, it worked. Oh shit. And like his familiar like turns to him and is like, why are you upset? This is the best possible outcome.
Yeah, you saved the town.
Like, yeah. He's like, I was kind of just hoping that like I might get to go and bait it. It's like, that's a death sentence. It's like, but if I had survived, it would have been awesome. It's like the familiar's like, how do you imagine this going? And then he describes like running out, weaving through all the monsters, throwing his pitchfork at the giant stick, and then enraging it, and then having it chase him like across the village and into his trap, and like him skidding around, like just barely making it by the skin of his teeth. So he basically had a story to chat chicks up with at a bar, and like the familiar's just like, oh my god, you're an idiot. And like basically the first time he did all of those things, and I wrote that out as like 14,000 words, and I was just like, this is what I'm saving. I'm saving it as like one paragraph of description of what he wanted to do, and it wouldn't work. And everyone just calling him an idiot, because I was like, I felt like such an idiot after writing. Like, this is so stupid. No one survives this. This thing is like, yeah,
dude, that's rough. Anytime I hear like, I scrapped this many words, it's just like, oh, cringe.
Well, I used to think the same. But then I sat down one day and thought about it, and I was like, oh, hold on. Every time I scrap words, my book gets better. And do I care about keeping words, or do I care about producing something better? And once I realized I care more about producing something better, it's never bothered me again that I might go scrap 5,000 words, 10,000 words, or anything, or scrap an entire book. It's like, I want to be better. And sometimes it involves like cutting out the things that you thought were good. And you're like, this is not good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a really good point.
So that's my 20 minute answer for question one.
Well, even Rachel coming in, she said, that she agreed when you got to have something that's driving that character's interest toward getting that power if you go that route. And that was kind of going back to one of the beginning points. Now, one of the things is, we talked about conflict and, of course, conflict within the story, maybe within your side characters going OP. So how do you like to find or analyze if you're balancing out that conflict?
So it depends on what story you're telling, really. And what sort of conflict you want to give to the story.
Right.
Is like with unorthodox farming, it might be like sort of book 6 before we ever see something that's like, oh, this is an actual physical threat. Because I made him really OP at the end of book 2. Well, not OP, but like a lot stronger at the end of book 2. And because of that, he has a mismatch of skill and power. Oh, so actually, let's go off at a tangent again.
Well, I'm looking at unorthodox farming. You only have 2 books on Amazon, but you're talking about a book 6.
Yeah. So, well, I sort of planned out the arc of the character over the series. Okay. So I kind of know where he's going and what's happening and what each book has to be. So power for Arnold and like actual fighting and conflict like that has never come into the story because he's always using other methods. This is the series is very much a look at what happens if you bring someone with knowledge of our world into a fantasy world and changes it. And so there's that playing out, and then there's the ramifications of that playing out. And so once you start getting into the ramifications of that playing out, that's when it's like, oh, you might actually need to be like strong enough to fight here. And there's a bunch of other stuff going on. I'll destroy the kingdom a couple of times. You know how it is.
Okay, sure.
So I've gone off into tangent and I've completely forgot what we're talking about.
We're talking about conflict.
Yeah. So you have to just kind of decide with your character, like, whether or not there is actually fighting conflict for them. Because sometimes for stories, you don't actually need, like, battle conflict. It's not necessary to the story. And especially if you... So with Arnold, because like the battle conflict isn't actually the problem, I don't worry about it. But with Vampire Vincent, he's an OP main character. So for him, conflict is always everyone around me is so much weaker than me. So I can go into battle, I can fight and do that. It's like, but I don't like how much weaker than everyone else is than me. And I'm basically evil. I know I'm evil. I'm trying to be good. But I fail often. Mm-hmm. And because of that, like his idea is, I want the people around me to be as powerful as they can possibly be, stronger than me. So if I cross the line, they can put me in check.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, as soon as you said that, I was like, oh, what if he was like powering up other people just so that they could try to be a challenge for him? And then he just keeps devouring them of like, you were not strong enough still.
No, I'm throwing every like vampire cliche in the kitchen sink into Vampire Vincent. So you've got the sexy vampire, you have got the like the long flowing hair, you've got
that's
the
always
absolute
slick and greasy or wet looking.
Yeah. you got wet looking. You got the just like washboard abs. You've got the like OP over the top power level. And then I'm like, okay. I'm making the joke in book 1. Like, I hope I don't sparkle. And so I've worked that into book 2.
Nice.
Yeah.
I mean, I tell people the Twilight movie series is the best comedy series there ever was. I mean, that's all it was me laughing during all of it.
Yeah. Yeah. So,
well, I guess here, let me modify the question and get your take on it. Do you ever feel like there's too much conflict? And in my approach with Golem Master, like the main character, there's conflict with his mom. He has conflict with his nemesis at school. He has conflict with the world and just his situation in life. Do you feel like there's ever too much conflict?
Okay, so fun saying. Okay, if you meet an asshole at breakfast, you meet an asshole at lunch, you meet an asshole at dinner, the problem's probably not them, it's you. So, yeah. So, if your character's got conflict with everything going around him, he's either in a grimdark setting, or he's the problem, or she's the problem, and so you have to decide which one it is. Like, there's in most people's lives, there is one or two things that are like good going on, and that trigger warning. That's one of the things that like keeps us from being suicidal. It keeps us from doing self-destructive behaviors. And if your character has nothing going on for them at all, and it's been like that for years, they will move into a deep, dark place a lot of the time. Either that, or they'll get so angry at the world that they will pull themselves out of that situation. Because, so when you look at like hyper-competent people in the world, there was some researchers pointed out that they come from two scenarios. One, they either had like the most supportive family and like people always pushing them up and helping them get better, and so they had that like that safety to like push themselves to excel. And the other one is, I had an absolutely terrible childhood, terrible upbringing, and I just said F you to the world and just like pushed myself as hard as I possible and like rose above it. One of those is way more common than the other one, and it's not hard to guess which one. And so when it comes to conflict, you can have too much conflict if it's everything in the world. But if it's the character causing the conflict and causing all these problems, then it's not as big a deal, as long as the character's likable. Like, as long as the character's likable. Like, you can have a guy who like have an absolute like terrible like girlfriend, and everyone's like, she's like getting you in all this danger, this is all these problems, all this horrible stuff that's happening. He's like, yeah, but she's hot. And then as a reader, we're just like, oh my god, you're an idiot, you deserve what's coming. and so if we think at that point that he deserves the conflict, and he's funny and he's interesting, and we're just like, let's see how he screws it up this time, we're going to love that conflict. But yeah, it's one of those things, you can almost do anything in writing, you just have to do it the right way. And the right way in most scenarios is, this reflects life. So you can have everything be like terrible for this guy, and you just like, why is it all terrible? He keeps making the worst possible mistakes.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's in First Line of Defense, you do a little tactic at the beginning of respawning.
Yeah.
So, yeah, you know, that was a fun little way of like, oh, here's a work around the system. Okay.
Yeah. Oh, I don't lose XP. I lose money. Well, I need XP. Okay. We're going to die. I got lots of XP. Cool. I leveled my enemies so I get more XP. Yeah.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. Kyle is coming in and saying, man, why haven't I spent more time reading your books? I'm so angry that I haven't put your other books to the head of my TBR pile. You are a gem of a writer, and I'm looking forward to what you put out next.
Thanks, Kyle.
And then, of course, Nico's coming in like, yeah, duh. Ben is amazing. So,
hey, Nico.
Okay, so I guess if you want to transition, Miss Aoife, who's not in the chat, but she wanted to make sure she asked the question. She was really curious about your approach in the world building for Deathblood and Vampires with Vincent. She said it was brilliant, and she was really curious of like how you took that approach.
Okay. Does she have anything more specific?
No, that was literally it.
Okay, cool.
And
so
go.
we're gonna be here for 20 minutes. So the approach with Vampire Vincent was very, very different because it's an OP main character, and so I decided that I wanted to write Dracula with dad jokes. Well, actually, I didn't decide I wanted to write Dracula with dad jokes. I was trying to write, what is it? I think it was book 3 of First Line of Defense, the first draft of it. And this idea for a vampire book kept like annoying me. And it was day after day after day. And so it's sort of like 2.5 weeks into this like annoying feeling going, come write this book. It'll be cool. I'm like, okay, this is annoying me too much. It's actually slowing down my writing now. I will spend the day writing this book because I know how my brain works. My brain is like, oh, the moment you make this like work, we lose all the fun of it. So I will generally write until my brain goes, okay, we don't know what happens next. And then stop and just like, cool, I can throw that away. My brain doesn't bother me. That never happened with Vampire Vincent. The first day I wrote, I think it was 8,000 words. And then the next day it was like 9,000, then it was 10,000, then it was like, and like when you write 8,000 words in a day, you're like, okay, that's 10 days to get a draft. We can do that. We can spend that extra time. And the second day I wrote 9,000 words, it's like, okay, this is still going well. And it's kind of cool. So we're going to keep going. Third day, fourth day, 10, I think it was 11 days. I wrote a 92,000 word draft. And I got to the end of it. I was like, this is almost finished. This is very good. Anywho, back to the world building. Because he was a OP main character, the world building for that series is so much different. So he's Dracula with dad jokes, and it means that I can't throw him into a general story arc. So the regular story arc. You ever read Wizard's First Rule?
No.
Okay. Aragon.
No.
Okay.
You're probably not going to have very much success in this game. We could be here for like 4 days.
Okay. So the idea in traditional fantasy arc is you have your protagonist like sort of, oh, this is your enemy, this is the big bad, and we're going to build you up and you're going to go and fight it and kill it. And so like the idea of a lich is generally like, if not a 1-book arc, it's a 3-book arc. And so that like he deals with a lich in the first like third of the book. So that the whole series is different because it's plotted like I took entire like what should have been book arcs and I make them like just milestone villains. Like, oh, the random abandoned encounter your character has is a lich with an army of like 1 million undead. Why? Because you're Dracula. Dracula doesn't deal with bandits. Dracula deals with liches. And how does Dracula deal with liches? Dracula just walks in there and goes, yeah, I'm going to get out of this. Don't worry. Yeah. And so because of that, it completely changes how I have to world build because you're not really seeing low-level threats ever in this. You'll hear about them, but you'll never see them because like the main character doesn't consider them issues. They're pest control from his perspective. And so it's like, oh, we have an ogre problem. Yeah, they're ogres. Okay, we'll ignore that. I've got to go and deal with the anti-saint, like demonically possessed child that has like just broken out of its holding spell. And because of that, you see the really cool stuff in the world, and you're never going to see the low-level stuff.
Yeah.
Actually, yeah. And so it means that, like, to tell that story and keep it interesting and keep it going, I had to build a really, really, really big world. Because, like, someone that powerful is going to literally deal with all the major threats on a continent in about a year and a half, 2 years. And so it's like you need a really big world so that like he can never fully get on top of this.
Yeah.
What is it? It's like, I remember hearing something like, you get it to a certain like stage, like you could have like of population, you can literally have like doing human sacrifices every minute, and it doesn't affect like society because you have such a large population that it's sustainable basically. And
we just went really grimdark really quickly. Like, oh yes, let's just do human sacrifices every minute. It's fine.
Yeah. But it's like if you need it, like in that series, because of the threats being so big, there's a lot of people dying, there's a lot of people getting hurt, but you need a big enough world where it can sustain that much damage but keep going. And so that's sort of what I meant in the world building sense. It's like if you go back to like historical norms sort of in like 800 AD and you go to like armies and stuff in England, there's a few thousand people in them, as opposed to like modern day armies where you have like, oh, we have this like 40,000 over here, 40,000 over here, 40,000 over here. And that larger scale means like you absorb the deaths scale wise better.
Mm-hmm.
Like just in a storytelling sense, because when you have that OP character, stakes are huge, stakes are never small. So it changes how you do everything. It's never that tiny little intimate story. It's the, okay, let's go smash the city and then carry on and let them rebuild. Because I'm Dracula, I don't help with the rebuild.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting you say that when it comes to like the scale of things, because in book 3 of The Dying Breed, there's a siege that occurs at a dwarven kingdom. And that siege, the dwarves themselves, is like half the book, because you have the initial siege and it's like, oh yeah, we destroyed the Freish. Look at these frog bastards. They can't defeat us. Like, that was the little, test to see how your defenses are. And then the next chapter is the next day or so. And so it's a 4-day long siege. And that was one of the things I hated. I was like, no, this isn't like a 30-minute battle scene. Like, this is weeks long or days long.
Yeah. And that's one of the things is like, enough to see the fake in that scenario.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So when it came to the world building of Vampire Vincent, I decided I wanted a big world. But one of the things about building a big world is you have to justify how people survive in that world. So because the main character is so powerful, I wanted a higher scale of power, and having a higher scale of power literally changes your society. Like I was talking to a friend the other day, and it's like, if you have farmers as strong as Captain America, you don't have horses. Captain America shoves the plow in the ground and then just walks down like across the field. And
no, you're totally right.
But that changes how society works. And then you have these farmers that are all butch as can be, but they have high yields, and that gets rid of food scarcity. So then you have the next step up, which is more technology and more not resources, materials. You have everyone has nicer houses, everyone has nicer furniture, things like that. And like with the Vampire Vincent, it was like, oh, okay, so you've got geomancers in this world, so they can move rock and stone. It's like, cool. Can they build a house with that? Can they build a fortress with that? Yes. Can they do this like relatively easily? It's like, yes, they can knock up the shell of a house in a day. So it takes one guy 1 day to build the shell of the house, and you have people go inside and do like all the extra bits after. Pretty much, it's like, okay, everyone has super huge houses because like 1 day effort's like nothing, and if magic's common enough in this world, it's like, okay, this is one of the ramifications that come from it. the second ramification is you have really, really big town walls. Like a small town wall is 50 feet high and like 5 meters thick. And it's like they like the geomancers knock that up in a week. Then everyone like lives inside. So you actually have a secure, like, this is how you survive trolls and ogres and all that sort of stuff. It's like you can build really big, really powerful towns really quickly. And everyone's got slightly higher stats. So the idea of, oh yeah, I have to run half a K out of town in the morning to get to my field. It's a short walk. Their attributes are higher than what ours is. So you with world building and like just system design, you want to know how everything fits in and how everything interacts. Because each time you add something to a world, like a technology, a new magic, it should change the world. Like I remember as writers, we sit there in a room by ourselves contemplating stupid things every so often. And so a few years ago, I was contemplating fire magic and the development of technology. And I realized that like both gunpowder and like gasoline and vehicles would not be a thing if you had wizards. If a wizard can light something on fire without seeing it, neither of those two technologies develop. Because you have a guy walking around with gunpowder on his hip for a musket. And the wizard is on like the other side of the battlefield. Is like, boom, tiny little spark inside that thing. And now the guys are walking explosive. And so one of the things about technologies as you bring them in is they can't be a danger to yourself. And like if you have wizards, gunpowder becomes really dangerous as a thing to carry around. But that also means that anything highly flammable becomes dangerous to carry around. And like you don't need powerful wizards for this thing to be like completely change how like society develops and how warfare develops. And so like whenever you add, since I've thought about that, whenever I add something new to a world, I go, how does this change how everything develops?
Yeah.
Yeah. And like one of the things, like, especially with lit RPG, is you always have to kind of remember, depending on how your system's built and what sort of monsters are around and how frequent they are, you're basically writing a society that's always in wartime. Because it's like, oh, yeah, we always have the threat of the troll coming into the village and killing everyone. So you're always got the scenario where like they're constantly aware of the danger, but they're just living with it. And so that changes your society, but it also changes the emphasis of what they care about. Because you have the difference between a peacetime and a wartime economy is huge.
Mm-hmm. No, it's good because there's that contrast. And I know when I did a mission with the Air Force to Israel, and this was, 6 years ago, we're standing there at night with this patrol unit, a K9 unit, and we had we're going around the circle like, oh, hey guys, I'm TJ, this is Ryan. And they're introducing themselves and they're like, oh, I'm from, this city of Israel. I'm from this city. And then there goes this one guy. He's like, oh, hey, I'm George. I'm from, Brooklyn, New York. You're like, what the hell? And so he became our interpreter for us and started talking, but he was an Israeli military guy. And so then he explained to us, he's like, yeah, last week there was a pipe bomb that blew up 3 people down the block from me. And then the day before that, my good buddy got stabbed in West Jerusalem. And then the day before that, there was a guy who was an active shooter with a machine gun. And we were like, oh my God, this is terrible. And he's like, this is every day for us. Yeah. And it's those differences of culture of like, you have to put yourself mentally into this world and think about, if I am living daily in this environment, what is that like?
Yeah. Yeah. And what do I prioritize? Why do I do things certain ways? And like it's one of those things that I've always thought a little bit weird. And more lit RPG doesn't emphasize the fact that everyone's walking around with a sidearm. Like everyone should have a short sword on their, like it's the zombie apocalypse. Everyone should have a short sword or a knife or something to fight the zombie. You're always got something to fight the zombie. In a little RPG world, you should always have some weapon with you to fight off the monsters. Unless your monsters are less frequent, in which case it's okay. But yeah.
I feel like that should be a special item for all the lit RPG authors who are in here. A special loot item should be Benjamin Kerei's machete that their character gets, and they just constantly keep it with them.
Yeah. But yeah, like thinking about the on-flow effects of what your system and what the powers you've introduced to this world does makes a more immersive world. And like with the Vampire Vincent, it was definitely something that I was more aware of, that like there's a power scale to this world, and I needed to work out where he fit into it and like why he fit into that place specifically. So, and how did that change everything? Because like you haven't watched The Immortals or whatever it's called.
I'm so sorry. You know, it's hard enough. It takes us 6 months to get an interview scheduled. I can only imagine how it's going to be like, bro, watch this series and watch this series. Let's talk about it.
Yeah. Well, the only other option is to use Twilight, which is just sad. So I'll use Twilight. So yes, I'm good. So in Twilight, the vampires are super fast, super strong.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing about that is, if they're actually violent, like they're actually evil vampires, having one of them, they could kill all day, every day, as fast as they possibly could, and they would not like exterminate the human race at this point. The human race is too big. We're spread out too far. So they go through one town, kill everyone in that town, move to the next town, kill everyone in the next town. They would actually not be fast enough to do things. So it's like you'd have massacre.
Not with that negative attitude, Ben. I was saying, let's try this. Come on.
Yeah, and so like I was looking at this with my characters, like with like my character's level power. I was like, these guys could actually, like, he couldn't do it by himself, but like them as a collective, like ancient vampires, could literally exterminate humanity. And I was like, there's probably a couple of other things on the planet that like, oh, they want to exterminate humanity too. And so I was like, I didn't want this guy to be the absolute apex, but I wanted him very, very close to the top. And what that meant was I had to work out, how do these things not destroy the planet? Because I describe an ancient vampire as a walking calamity. And like, these guys are literally like incredibly hard to stop. And so the problem with that is that you've got to work out how the system works, how everything works. And for them, it was like, oh, there are things that want to hunt in this world, and there are things that want to destroy this world. And a lot of these vampires, they like terrorizing humanity. They are top dog up here. They descend to hell, and they've created hell on earth, and they descend to hell, and they're bottom bitch. Like they're like alpha, like on our planet, but they are like bottom of the rung demons. And I was like, that's way cooler. Because then you have like monsters with a vested interest in like keeping like humanity alive. Oh yeah, we're still going to like massacre cities and stuff like that because it's fun. But we're also not going to like hunt our hunting ground into extinction. So if there's other giant calamities walking around, we're like, yeah, that might just like destroy the planet. We're going to stop that.
Interesting.
And yeah, and it's one of those things that like you kind of have to like think about completely, because it's like if you look at like cartels and gangs and stuff, they survive because a society exists, because they feed on the society. And if you completely and utterly destroy the society, there's nothing to feed them. And so you actually have
That's a very unique way to combat gangs. I don't know if my chief of police would go for that. If I like, chief, crazy concept, we're going to get rid of the city. That'll get rid of the gang problem. I don't know if city council will go for this approach, Ben.
Well, no. It's not so much about getting rid of the gangs. It's looking at the fact that if they completely and utterly destroy their environment, they lose their power too. So it's like when you overhunt an area, when you overgraze a field, everything dies because of it. And so with like vampires for this sake, it's like they don't want that scenario. They don't mind tormenting humans. They actually quite enjoy it, but they don't want to destroy everything completely and utterly. Mm-hmm. And I was like, these guys are there to torment, not destroy. And I thought that was way more interesting. They were an ongoing like.
Well, it's kind of like Monsters Inc., right? Like we're gaining energy off of the screams and the fear of the children, but we don't want to destroy the children either. Yeah.
Sorry, I've got a cold.
Oh no, you're good, dude.
Nose keeps getting blocked. So because I introduced such powerful elements into that world, I had to work out what was the balancing act and how everything sort of stabilized. Because you can, in most series, you can get away with introducing one calamity. I introduced calamities like 3 times a book generally. And I'm like, so I have to work out how this like system survives. And I did that going, okay, there is evil in this world, but there's some evil in this world that is actually invested in keeping this world running. So they can torment it as they please and basically keep the playground.
Nice.
Yeah.
I like that.
Admittedly,
sorry.
Admittedly, I completely stole that from either Buffy or Angel.
Oh, it's fine.
Yeah.
That's fine. It's what is it? The biggest form of flattery or whatever is when you mimic something else.
Yeah, it's also bad when you do it and then you don't realize, and then you go, like 6 months later after you've released the book, you go, oh shit, I did that. Like one of the funniest things was I knew I was going to write like sort of a piratish rogue character with Morgan, and I didn't think it through, but I wrote him. I call him Morgan Bartholomew Winchester, which was Morgan Bartholomew from Pirates of the Caribbean, who created the pirate codes. And then the first thing he does when he meets an alien is he calls for parley. And it was after I'd finished the book that I realized this. Was like, I just steal everything, don't I?
Well, I think it's some of those things where we don't realize how much, like, there's times where people are like, oh, you pirated that, you copied that. And it's like, at the time of writing, you don't realize that maybe you'd read it like 5 or 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And the inspiration that's coming to your mind as you're writing is remnants of some of that stuff.
Yeah. If I'm ever doing it consciously, I put the reference in. Like I have in book 2 the main character shouting parkour, and that's because Dresden does it, and I put in the fact that it's my dad's favorite PI wizard. So like if I do it consciously, I do it. I state it, but it happens way too frequently unconsciously.
Yeah, and that's where. Well, I know for me, like with Golem Master, it's like my shout out to Pokemon. And you know, it was one of those things of like, how do so some people I think will hate me because it's like, yes, I love Pokemon. I stopped at Gold and Silver though, and I moved on with life. I love Gundam, but I only have seen maybe 2 hours of Gundam, period. I love this. So this is all I'm using as my inspiration. I'm sorry for all the super nerds out there who are like, how dare you blaspheme these things? But it's like, if I could make my version of these things together, it's Golem Master. Here you go.
Yeah.
It's supposed to be just enough like it that you fall in love with it in the same nostalgic way, but it's supposed to be different to where you're like, this is a cool, unique take on it.
So you have Pokemon like Gundam like hybrid. That's cool.
Yeah, because that's where I was like, I've always wanted to write a Pokemon like story.
Yeah.
I just couldn't figure out how I could make it work and make it different. And I've really loved writing like arena combat scenes. I think it's super fun. And so it was during Guildify Con, I think right before or right after 20 Books Vegas, where Michael Chatfield, Brian Norton, and I think one or two others were on a panel. And Michael Chatfield was like, I feel like people are not using golems as much as they should. It's like an untapped resource. And like the light bulb came on and I started going kind of like you do with vampires and stuff. And I was like, yep, this is it. This is exactly where I need to go. The problem I had was I had not finished Bloodbath 3 yet. So I wrote the prologue and I think chapter 1, and I just shelved it. I did not even have the main character's name yet until like chapter 3. And then I went back and had to input their actual name. So, but yeah.
I've got a book I wrote the first draft for. I still don't know what he's called. I put his name as Bob Smith for a filler.
Yeah.
He's been Bob Smith for 4 years now. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, dude. So this is a question.
I was going to say, I totally agree that like golems are underdone. I've got my own golem story I eventually want to write. Well, I want to read it. If I have to write it, I'll write it. But I prefer someone else to. But like, I thought like one of the coolest things was Pacific Rim. I just loved the idea of like giant robots fighting kaiju. I was like, what'd be really cool is a medieval society where like wizards have like these giant like things to like empower spells, and then they summon like a stone golem. But instead of it being like 8 feet tall, it is freaking like 250 feet tall. And so you have like this wizard like basically like astral projecting into a giant stone golem and going fighting giant kaiju. So Pacific Rim, but with magic.
That's also a part of Golem Master.
Oh, that's awesome.
Dude,
that's awesome.
And so
okay.
I'm really excited because your character is about to come into the book. It's so like the other part of the story is like, it's my dedication and thank you to the Lit RPG community because of like how awesome everyone is. So I've like added as many people as possible, but I have you and Eric Uglin getting into an argument like while having cigars, and the main character comes up. And you guys are arguing over the runes on the rift portal that the demons came through. And Eric's like, no, I think it's this. And you're like, it's clearly this. Like, how do you not see it, Eric? So, so you guys have a really cool part of this. So,
oh, cool. Yeah. Eric better be telling dirty jokes.
Let's see. Nico saying, I forgot to change the name of my MC of my epic fantasy series. Her name is Andy Rogers. Rogers, she's a flipping dragonborn sorceress. Nice. Okay, so we had a question here earlier from a good mutual friend of ours, Rob Gagno. Or Gagnon, however he says it. Love him. So he wanted to know, he's awesome. Do you work in plot twists in advance, or do they just come up, or maybe do you put them in afterwards in one of your edits?
Both. So actually all three. So I will have an idea for a plot twist that I'm building towards, and I'll put that in. And so other times I will be like, because sometimes you'll just put things into a book and be like, oh, this is an interesting idea. This is an interesting idea. This is an interesting. And a lot of the time when you do that, you like, as you get better at writing, your brain makes them thematic. So they're all in this like a similar train of thought. And so you get to this point and you'll be like, wait, all those three things, they mean this. And then you plot twist and the whole thing's like, and you're like, holy crap, that's cool. I totally intended to do that. I'm a genius. This is not an accident. Yeah. And then there's you come back and you read and go, I need a plot twist here, I need a plot twist here, I need a plot twist there. And when I did Unorthodox Farming, the funny plot twist was the plan worked. You have an entire book of build-up and like, oh, we're going to capture a giant. And genre convention says something goes wrong at the end. And I was like, no, the plot twist is nothing goes wrong at the end. Everyone's waiting for it, and it works. And then you just show the character's disappointment, because that alleviates the reader's disappointment, because your goal is to always make the reader feel something. And if the reader's expecting a plot twist and they don't get the plot twist, they have disappointment. However, if you make the character disappointed in that scene, what it does to the reader is it actually separates the emotion from them. They're like, oh, there's disappointment here. Yes, but it's the character's disappointment. And then you throw in a joke after that and they're like, that was great. I love this. Because like the art of writing is partly telepathy, partly manipulating emotion. You want to show readers a world that they've never seen before, and build it up in their mind. And you want to make them feel certain emotions at the right time. And what you do in the plot can cause them to feel the right emotion or the wrong emotion. And so one of the things about like not having that sort of twist ending, or not having something unexpected happen at the end, is you don't get that chance to ramp up the tension. You don't get that chance to go, oh, I didn't expect that. And the unexpected happening causes our brain to kind of like freak out, and it dumps a bunch of dopamine, which takes short-term memory to long-term memory. So one of the reasons you do this at the end of a book is because it takes everything that the person's read and stores away in long-term memory. Go, this is kind of scary and unexpected. We need to remember this for the future. And when done right, you have this vivid experience of, oh, I remember that book so clearly. It was very, very engaging. And so because I didn't do that at the end, I had to do a different twist, which is humor. So things that are funny, we tend to remember. So because everything goes well, I then have to do the situation where it's like, okay, we have to distance the emotion for the reader, the frustration that they didn't get to see the twist. And then I hit them with a joke, and they're like, hey, this is funny, this is great, I am enjoying this. And the brain drops dopamine and takes more things to long-term memory.
That's interesting. I had no idea about that.
Yeah. So part of the reason why like the most memorable books have these giant plot twists at like halfway through the book is because of biology. So you throw those things in because it takes everything from short-term to long-term memory. Those twists, your brain just freaks out and goes, what the hell? And goes, we need to remember this. Oh my God, we could die if we don't know this. And so everything goes to long-term memory. The same thing happens with prompts. So prompts in Lit RPG, what that does is that is a concrete like example of growth. And so we're always as human beings trying to grow and develop, and we're trying to learn new things that matter to our survival. When we believe the character's real, when we believe that they're fully ground out and they're interesting, we treat them like a real person in life. And so when we see them do something concrete that improves their life through a stat like dump, our brain drops dopamine so we can take it to long-term memory. So one of the reasons why like Lit RPG is so vivid in our minds is because it has an inbuilt mechanism to make you remember everything, which is also why a lot of readers get like Lit RPG fatigue after about the first 2 years, because the brain at that point goes, oh, we have so many examples now of this stuff. We don't actually need to do the dopamine dump because we've seen this done in this case, this case, and this case. We can just like relax.
So that's a really good question.
Yeah.
Do you think that's why we see trends within Lit RPG where
changing?
We have like the virtual reality game, then we have isekais, now we have deck builders. Do you think that's a part of it?
It definitely helps, yeah. For people who are like avid readers and just reading heaps and heaps and heaps, it is definitely part of it. It's those people who go, oh, I went through all of that and no longer gives me my fix. Then I went through the isekais and no longer gives me my fix. Now I'm in the deck building stage, and then there'll be another stage after that. The other part of it too, though, is that each stage of the genre's development taught writers new things. Like, without the gamified versions, the like people in a video game first books, it's a lot harder to make the fantasy lit RPG stories work. 'Cause we learned a lot from the video game guys, what they did right, what they did wrong. And for the deck building stuff, those guys learned off the guys who are writing the fantasy lit RPGs, like the isekai stories. And like the next group will learn off what the deck building guys are doing. And it's the interesting thing of being like so new to the genre. Because like you go back a few decades now to when like steampunk started, and steampunk had the same sort of thing going on. They were trying all sorts of different things, and it wasn't till about 10 years in that you had the genre conventions. And if you're looking at lit RPG, it sort of started in like the US and the West in about 2015, and it's probably next year sometimes we're going to get the really like clear-cut genre conventions, maybe a year or two after.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I know we've done Guildify Con, and there has been Dragon Con. They're building into Jordan Con, but I think you're right. I'm hoping next year Jordan Con will really be a big convention for lit RPG. But have a dedicated place for it would be great.
Well, it's not so much that. I mean within the genre, like, you know, in a fantasy novel what the tropes are. So there's a Dark Lord. There's the like young farm boy. There is the wise old wizard. These are all tropes and stuff that are built up, that like built into it. Have you ever read? I keep asking this. John Carter of Mars.
No.
Okay, so it was written by the guy. Yeah, it was written by the guy who wrote Tarzan, early 1900s, and in this book, basically he has laser rifles, but the thing is, the only thing they have is like 1,800 guns to go off. So I think this is like 1903. This was written. So you look at how old guns were. So he's basically describing like laser rifles the way you would describe a rifle from like 1890. Yeah. And now we just go blasters. So we don't have to describe, like he goes through describing all the different parts of it. We just go, I have a blaster. I shoot the thing. Everyone knows what a blaster is because it's part of the genre convention now. And so, like in lit RPG, we're still at the stage where we're explaining a lot of things, and the readers are like, "What is this?" It hasn't fallen into general use in like culture yet. And so, as it does, it won't be, "Oh yeah, we go into the book and we explain how the system works." It's just like you go into the book. There's a system, and it works this way, this way, this way, and we'll have a lot more shorthand, and there'll be a lot less info dumping, and it'll change how things are done. And it's like, oh, if you're doing an apocalypse series, well, these are the things that are always in apocalypse series because they always work. These are the things that are always in isekai novels because they always work. These are the things that are always in deck building novels because they work. Because for like certain story types, there are only so many ways you can tell the story, like that makes sense to the reader. Like you can't write a romance novel where there's no one for the person to fall in love with. You can't write a romance novel where the person sees himself in the mirror one day and like, oh my God, I love you. You're just so amazing. We should get together.
I'm really seeing if I can accept this challenge. Like, how would I write this?
Yeah. but like you can write it, but the thing is, readers read and go, okay, this is stupid. And if you do write it, and it works, I guarantee you. I guarantee you haven't written a romance
Reeves movie where what was it, The Letters at the Lake or whatever?
Oh yeah, but like if you do write it successfully, You've not written a romance, you've written a comedy. So, because like, there's no way to take that seriously. Someone actually falling in love with themselves. Like everyone listening go, oh my gosh, that's so stupid. And so it could work, but you're probably making it into a comedy because it's really funny as a comedy. So like, that's one of the things about genres is like, there's only so many things you can do within a genre and within a subgenre before it gets too absurd for us to believe.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, I think, like we already said, I think that's exactly why also we have almost the different seasons of Lit RPG. Like, yes, the fantasy season is the most selling historically, but at the same time, you can only come up with so much before readers are like, dude, I've already got my 5 favorite fantasy Lit RPG series. I kind of want something different, dude.
Yeah. Well, so one of the interesting things about Korea
and then Nico's, of course, like challenging. What happened to you can literally write anything? LOL.
Okay, you can write anything, but like within certain genres, you have conventions you have to follow. So you can write the story you want to do. You just might be changing genre and not realizing it.
Ah, okay. There you go. Lit RPG romance.
Yeah.
Charisma level 30. Narcissism level 3000.
I mean that. Oh my god! I'm just imagining like a romance novel, and like there's always those scenes in romance novels where she sees the guy she's interested in come in with another woman. I'm just imagining it as a lit RPG -1 level.
Well, oh god, it was you it was at the panel in November when people were like, you can you always go upwards in your stats and stuff, and I was like, I've heard there's at least been 1 or 2 authors where they actually had you lose points for failing stuff, and I was like, that's still something that's been really unexplored.
It's a very hard thing to do. I had a friend do it. He wrote, what was it? How my wizard mentor had a heart attack now being chased by giant spiders.
That sounds like a David Bushman title.
Yeah.
It's just so long.
Yeah. So in that book, he has the character go and haggle, and he gets the haggling skill. And then like literally like 10 pages later, he goes and tries to haggle with another guy, gets absolutely ripped off, and loses the haggling skill. And that's really funny. It's really great. But it's one of those things. It's like, okay, that was a level 1 skill. That's fine. You got it. You lost it. It's like, okay, system's just reevaluating. That was a great joke. Once you get further on, it's one of these things. It's like when we lose levels, when the character loses levels, when they lose skill levels or whatever like that, we kind of have to suspend disbelief for that, because it's like you don't ever like fail to like cook dinner so badly that you get worse at cooking because of it. You just failed to cook dinner. So it's very, very hard to like justify the loss of a level in reader's head. Like you could,
or
trade it.
You did it like, you have failed the quest, therefore all your attacks are negative 10% disadvantage, or something like that.
Well, you could do that. It's like, oh, you're drunk? Yeah, minus like 40% dexterity, minus 20% agility, minus like plus 5% strength.
You can confidence.
Yeah. Yes, confidence. Oh my god.
I plus 400%. This. No, you cannot. Shut up.
Plus 400% confidence, plus 100% ego.
Yes.
So like you can do those temporary debuffs. That's totally fine. But what you're talking about is someone losing what they already had. And it's one of those things that doesn't reflect life. So in our mind as people, it's like once you've learned a skill, you have that skill. And so levels are a quantifiable way to measure your improvement. And so you need a very specific reason as to why they lose levels. So it's like if you have a quest and they lose 3 levels at the end because they failed it, that's fine, because this is an outside pressure being put on you to like drop it. If you just like casually lose it, it becomes a problem, because then your system becomes less concrete, it becomes more wishy-washy, and it's harder for your reader to like believe to a degree.
That's interesting. But I'm also thinking of it, maybe from like a starting point, like your prologue of like, you are back to level 1 life remaining.
Yeah.
Here we are again.
Yeah.
I've already tried this branch, and here I am on my 3rd option of life.
Yeah.
And you're like, what the hell are you talking about?
Yeah.
So,
well, you can't, like, there's a whole bunch of books like that. I think there's, what is it, The Tower Climber? The guy gets to the top of the tower like years in the future, then goes back in time and does everything over again. Part of the problem with doing those sorts of stories is that your character has too much of an advantage. They're straight out of the gate an OP main character, and because they're an OP main character, a lot of the fighting and stuff, especially when you're showing it as the writer, doesn't have tension, because like they're always hitting below their belt, below their weight. Sorry, yeah. They're like, I have so much skill. I don't have levels, but I have so much skill, and skill matters. And so it's like, oh, I did this before, but I can do it again, but like way easier now. So it's like, oh, we're going to throw you into a battle. I'm going to show you 10 pages of this guy battling, and I'm like, why? There is no conflict here. Of course he's going to kill this thing. This thing's like only 3 levels above him. Yeah, if it's 20 levels above him, maybe he's going to die, but this thing's 3 levels, and he's being smart. Of course he's not going to die. Why am I reading this pointless battle?
That makes sense. Nico coming in for the save, saying Aaron Hodges is the long-titled author of the book Ben's talking about.
Yep.
So she's saying he's a stellar writer. Check him out. Kyle's coming back in and saying, honestly, if it weren't for audiobooks, I would not have gotten into Lit RPG so easily. If I had picked up a physical book of Lit RPG, I probably would have set it down the genre without hesitation, but that has more to do with the stat blocks.
Yeah, for some people, they're an absolute no-no. For other people, they're absolutely awesome. And it's also why like the genre to a large degree has changed over time. Like when Lit RPG first started, Aaron Kong was definitely like back there in the beginning, and his was probably the least crunchy, I would say, of like what was out there at the time. Like after he released, there was this huge wave of things like, oh, you see all the maths behind it and all the stats and all that sort of thing. So I can totally see like people being like, yeah, I'll put that down. I like what Matt's done with Dungeon Crawler Carl. It's very unintrusive. Like he had more stats in the first few books, and now he's just not. He's going further and further away from it. He's closer to a fantasy novel now.
Well, that's where with Golem Master, I took very much Brian Norton's approach with Quest Academy, where it's very light as far as stats, and in reality, the stats get to constantly change because your Golem's stats sheet is only available after your match. So if you and I are going into a match, you might show up with a dragon, whereas last time I saw you had a giant, vampire monster. And it's like, well, holy cow, I don't know what his strategy is this game. So I don't get to see those stats until after. And it's also like, I'm not going to show you every single stat for every single golem. It's just whatever the main character is curious about, that's the stat sheet you get to see.
Yeah. And that's a good way to do it, because like, even in a fantasy novel, you're not seeing every letter the character reads, every page the character reads in a book. You're only seeing what's important, and like as a lit RPG writer, you've got to work out what stats to show and what is important and why is it important.
I had that problem with my fantasy series when I originally started. I had him like I was using this what is it, Dwarven Converter translator, and I had the whole spell cantation printed out, and I was like, yeah, this is dumb. He cast his spell. And I was like, easy.
Yeah. Well, it's one of those things that, like, if you're going to go really, really into the details for like, oh, how this works, that has to be a huge part of the novel. Like, one of the things about Aragon that was quite intriguing when I was a teenager was just the language that was used for magic. And it was a huge part of the book was, oh, you have to learn the language for spells. You can't be running around throwing fireballs without learning this like magical language. And so the bigger your vocabulary is, the more you can do. And that's really, really interesting, but it takes a huge word count. And it has to remain interesting through the whole thing. So you have to be willing to put in the work. And I have no interest in that whatsoever. I struggle with language. I'm not making a magical, I struggle with English. I'm not making a magical language so you can cast spells.
Yeah.
I don't like my characters that much.
No, that's a fair point, man. So I know Rob was also asking, how many edits do you normally go through on your manuscripts before they're
done? Generally at least 8.
Holy cow, dude.
Yeah, that's down from like, I think I did 14 or 15 for a great. I've got better over time. But yeah, 8 is pretty normal for me. Because I massively underwrite. So the first write is, oh, this is the book I've written. And then I like pick up the 90,000, 100,000 words or whatever and go, okay, what story am I trying to tell here? What doesn't fit in? Cut all that. What do I have to add? And so the next draft is adding all that, and they go, is this the book I want to I want to share? And they go, yes. Okay, now I have to do the next edit, which is adding all the details, adding all the character descriptions. Like, how do I then this next stage of how do I make this more evocative? How do I make this more interesting? And then you start doing the line editing, and it gets hard.
So when you're doing it that way, and you're adding your details kind of after, do you ever worry about the flow of the book?
No, because I write linearly. So when I'm editing, I go back and I will edit a chapter, read that chapter, start in the next chapter. And so I'm always going back and forth. And so it's always consistent from chapter to chapter. And once I've like made the continuity all consistent, I then look at the whole thing and go, oh, do I have to add anything anywhere? And if I do, then I have to go back to the 2 chapters before that and go, okay, read through that and then edit that to be consistent into the next chapter.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
I worked out years ago, I really, really suck at writing drafts. Like, I truly suck. And like the only way for me to write a decent book is through editing. I am hopelessly unskilled, like as a writer to begin with, when it like comes out as first draft. But by draft 8 or 12, I'm good, and I would prefer to be good, so I do as many edits as necessary.
So then, as you're talking to me about like how you build your systems and how you think about things, it sounds like you really plan out a vast majority of stuff, or are you more of the discovery writer?
Oh, I'm complete discovery writer for first draft. So okay. I like when I wrote Vampire Vincent, I sat down, I just wrote that in 10 days, no planning except for an interesting idea in my head. A lot of the world building I was doing as I was going, I was like, okay, so this needs to be happen, this needs to happen, this needs to happen. And I was like, these things are in here. I'm like, okay. And then when I get to the end, I go through and use that draft basically as a plot outline. Mm-hmm. And so I break down each chapter and go, okay, what I have to add and what world building do I have to do? What details do I have to change? Because one of the things about world building is unless your story is about a specific technology in the world, your world building is all just additional details. It's little things that can be tweaked to move back and forth. And so it's actually very easy to change that in a draft without massively affecting things. Nice. But yeah, before I publish the first book, I have all the world building now and I have everything consistent. So I know where I'm going with book 2.
Okay. I think with Golem Master, it was the first book that I actually did almost mainly discovery. I mean, I had those main points, right? Of like, okay, we're going to do this and we're going to do this. This is the end goal.
Yeah.
But then it's one of those things where it's like, as you start to write, those plot holes creep up on you where you have to be like, well, how would that work? And then you're like, oh, here you go. Or something else in life. I don't want to like mention how you and Eric get into it, but I was like, your guys' conversation is a huge game changer for later on. Yeah. But it's until you get into that scene in that moment, you don't ask yourself that question in the planning phase.
Yeah. And like, that's, what is it? Is it the Bugs Bunny thing? I can't remember. I remember seeing an old cartoon years ago, and you see like this character like puts down a plank of wood, puts in a nail, steps on the plank of wood, like puts another one down. And it's like basically building the bridge in front of him as you're going. And you're doing a lot of that as a writer. You're world building and building everything out as you're going through. You go, oh, I kind of know that this is over. Like I know this kingdom's over here. I know this kingdom's over here. I know this kingdom's up here. This kingdom's down there. Cool. That's what I know about these kingdoms. And then my character starts going further north and it's like, oh, he runs into someone from the kingdom. Oh, they're all Irish. Or they're all Mexican. Or they're all like, they have their own culture. And it's like, and I start building that as he starts interacting with that part of the world. Or you can do the alternative, which is build the entire world and then write the book. But that generally takes years. Yeah. So most of us build out what we need. You don't need to know what the kingdom in the north is like. You just need to know how it interacts with your kingdom. And the interaction will inform you about everything else. Like, are they hostile? Are they friendly? Is this like, are they like considered like, oh, we're a closely knit two countries? Like, is this like Canada and America? We have no border, like serious like border defenses or anything like that. And so like you do this with all world building. It's like, I kind of have an idea how this affects the world. And if I need to go into more detail, I will.
Yeah. Well, and you can even get down into the trap of, because I know Michael, Michael Chatfield was talking about like how he did all this research into this scientific equation and all these things. And it was like, and that was one sentence. And then you're like, I did all this world building of this other kingdom. And it's great, man. They got this king and this. Okay, well, how did that tie into your story? It was like a paragraph. Okay, so you spent like a week or 2 weeks thinking about this kingdom that really doesn't fucking matter.
Well, I'm going to get like, what is it? So writers will argue about this, that this was really important to know. Like I had to go into all these details. I spent 3 days learning about this specific gun, the ammo, what you can load into this and why, and it is 2 paragraphs. And occasionally, like it sounds like something that's unnecessary, but like just for how our brains work from a creative aspect, if we don't know how this is done enough, it can actually derail us as writers of, oh, I don't know how things progress because I don't understand what I'm dealing with. And
well, yeah, because you have to gauge that tension, that severity, that risk. You have to gauge all that.
Well, it's like, the guy has like 3 bullet wounds. It's like there, and there. Why are these positions important? For this specific reason, because like there's like a person like in front of them. These are the 3 places you could get hit. It's like, okay, do they die? Do they drop? Can they still stand? And so, like, it's a minor thing in a scene. Like, say the hostage is in front of them, they're protecting their faces. Like, can I hit them enough with these 3 spots to drop them on the ground? And will they or will they not pull the trigger? And so that can be like 4 days of research just to find out whether or not this happens. And people might be like, it depends on what you hit them with. It's like, sure, you hit him in the, like, you graze the leg with a Bret 50 caliber. Yeah, the leg's gone. He's on the ground. You're good. So it's one of these things like, if you don't know enough about the subject to fake it, that's generally when like writers really do our researches. Most of the time we're faking it. Like our knowledge about everything is faked. But we have enough basic information that we know that it's kind of real.
Mm-hmm.
And like we know that the experts are going to like tear us apart and be like, really? That gun does not take that ammunition, you idiot. But that's not a problem. We just need to know that this sort of thing is like possible. And that's where we go off in these like stupid tangents, like, and do like 4 days of research to work out one paragraph. And it's always about the weirdest stuff.
Yeah.
Like just the weirdest stuff.
Well, even like, Chatfield and I were talking about there's a certain line where you have to go from this is ultra realistic to this is entertainment. And you know, in Bloodbath, the combat is ultra realistic, but there is this entertainment Hollywood value where in one scene he's like, he shot the guy and the round knocked him against the wall and it was like a sprayed bladder mess of a decoration. And it's like, his body would not project his parts out like that. But that's where the entertainment comes in.
Yeah. And like it's one of those things like you want to know where you're breaking the rules. Like I love what is it, Django Unchained. There is that scene where like he shoots the woman like down the stairs and like it's like straight ahead sort of shot and she flies to the left. And you're just like you know this is physically impossible, but it's just so stupidly great. And like you can get away with that if it's just fun enough to do it. But you have to know the rules that you're breaking when you break them. And that's an important thing as a writer. It's like most people don't realize it's like when most artists are like cut, they breathe like profusely, but they don't go and just like fire blood across the room. But it's really funny when it fires blood across the room. And like you just have someone like is he still bleeding, takes the hands off, squirts in the mouth. I think so.
Well, it's been great working with the police department because like, well, one, it's I think one of the reasons why I naturally want to be a grimdark writer because you see so much stuff, you read so much stuff. But there is even we were going through an evidence class where our evidence tech is in there showing us this what looks to be a horrific murder scene. There is blood everywhere in this room. And there's this one where you see the blood is kind of like a bouncing trail. And he's like, okay, what is this from? And I'm finally looking at it and I'm like, that's from her ankle. And he's like, yeah, that's where she got cut. I was like, she's walking and that's the arterial blood as it's doing its trajectory. And he's like, yep, absolutely. And so what was funny though, is like the woman was fine. She like scraped her leg getting up to get a drink of water. But because of her state, she had no idea that she was bleeding and she just left this giant blood gory scene for the kitchen. But okay, so he's got one more question for you. Benjamin, what advice would you give to aspiring writers? Who do you aspire to have mentor you when it comes to improving as a writer?
Well, I had a writing mentor called David Farland. He wrote the Rune Lord series. He taught Brandon Sanderson. He was a Utah writer, and the guy was absolutely brilliant as a teacher. I'm at a weird stage where it's very, very hard to find like people to teach me. There's a stage with writing once you're sort of writing at a very professional level where the only way to improve is to work with a really skilled editor, and they will read your manuscript and they will point out where your weaknesses are, and you go away and keep practicing and working on your weaknesses. Because in writing, like a lot of things in life, your actual end result is only as good as your biggest weakness. So if you have one big flaw that's like really dropping the quality of your writing, and you remove that, everything jumps up to the next biggest flaw you have as a writer. And so, yeah, finding a writing teacher at this point would be very, very difficult for me, because like Oh Great, I Was Reincarnated wasn't the first book I wrote. It was like the 11th. I wrote a lot of books just as throwaway novels, just to practice and get better. So like, if you're asking about like what I would do to get better, I would write a couple of. First of all, you got to finish a novel. The biggest like barrier to being a writer is finishing your first novel, even if it's terrible. Finish your first novel. It's really. I say this with like as much love and respect while sounding like an asshole as I can. Until you finish that first book, it's not worth me talking to you about writing. The reason why is because 90%, even more than that, of people who go, you know what, I want to be a writer, will never finish that first book. And until you can sit your butt in a chair with no one out there motivating you and write that first book, I don't know if it's worth investing the time, because writing the first book is hard. Learning how to do that well for the second and third book is even harder. But until you can do that first one, it's not worth teaching you how to do everything else. I could literally sit there for years teaching you everything you need to know about writing, and then you sit down to write the book, and it's just too much for you, and you'll find out then. So you want to write a book, a bad book, even. Like, writing a terrible first novel is a great thing, because you can throw every cliche idea you want, every like self-insert you want. You could have the most overpowered main character, and like just have fun with it. Because like, if you want to be a writer, like in all honesty, want to be a writer, you need to love writing. It has to be fun and entertaining to you, because it's a self-motivated job. You have no one breathing down your neck, no one telling you to do things. So when you wake up in the morning and you don't want to go to work and you're full-time, you don't have to. But you have to be able to force yourself to go out there and write even when you don't want to. So get that first book finished. Find out whether or not you love writing. If you do love writing, well, then you're going to want to learn how to do it well. And if you've written that first book, the things I would look at for like improving for the like next basic steps is I would read the Fantasy Fiction Formula by Deborah Chester. It is one of the best books on writing technique for like sci-fi and fantasy writers. I would also then listen to Writing Excuses podcasts about the first 10 seasons. That were absolutely brilliant. I haven't listened past season 10, so I wouldn't know for the rest of it. Mary Robinette Kowal, her first ever episode, I think it's like season 4, episode 13, I think. It's absolutely brilliant. It is a discussion on puppetry, like using puppets like Kermit the Frog and stuff, and how their focus affects where the viewer's focus is. And she uses it to teach you how to direct the reader's focus using the similar techniques. And so, like, you're having a conversation, like two characters having a conversation, woman's at a table, and the guy's saying something she doesn't like. And she's going, I don't like this. And she says it. But it's more interesting if she picks up the knife and she's just like clenching her fist with the knife while she keeps talking. And and like you don't need her words to be aggressive, but that one action knows, oh, she's ready for violence, and her language can be at odds with what she's just done, and that's even more intriguing to us because we know like where her focus is, because her focus is moved to this knife, even though her like she's still speaking words, and so yeah, like. There's way too much to tell you, but yeah, write the first book, get that finished, then read the Fantasy Fiction Formula by Deborah Chester and listen to Writing Excuses podcast. And that's a good like second place. And then come find me when I'm doing another interview and I'll give you more information.
Well, I'll second the Fantasy Fiction Formula. I think I've listened to that book twice on Audible.
Yep.
Great book. And it's one of those where even as I would say, regardless of what level you are as an author, re-listen to it because it'll make you question like, okay, am I hitting that? Yeah, I am. What, you know what? I need to focus on this.
Yeah. I will say one thing. I'll just add. When you're writing your first book, this first novel you write, do not write your baby. You have an idea you've always wanted to write. Do not write that story for your first novel. Like everyone sucks at writing the first time. Everyone. And because of that, you'll absolutely ruin the idea, and you will try to fix the idea as you're ruining it. And you will spend more time trying to not destroy your baby than you'll spend actually learning about writing. So you want to write an idea that's fun, that's interesting, and which is enjoyable, but not your baby. You come back to your baby like 5 years down the track when you actually know enough to write it. And what I was going to say is, I'm a big like supporter of going in blind to writing, especially for the first book. So while the Fantasy Fiction Formula is very, very helpful and will teach you the basics of what you need to know, a lot of the time you just need to be able to get your butt in chair and write. And that's the most useful thing to learn for your first book. And trying to do things to the standard of what you learn from like writing instructions actually slows you down at that very first stage, because you're like, oh, I need to do this better. I need to do this better. I need to do this better. And like for practical purposes, I would count anything over 50,000 words as a good first book. It doesn't need to be like a giant, like Chihuahua killer that you drop it on a small dog, it dies. It just needs to be what you would consider a solidly long story, not a short story. And that's enough knowledge to tell you, oh, okay, I can then go and do I can do this.
I mean, you could even start with novellas.
Yeah, a lot of people do. I'm completely the opposite. I've never been able to do novellas. So do you know what's it called? What's that big fantasy and sci-fi competition for short stories?
I don't know. There's a competition? What?
Yeah, there's a really big one. Writers of the Future.
Oh, okay. Oh, yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So I tried to do Writers of the Future twice, from like 2015 to 2020. I have no problem writing a 100,000 word novel or a 150,000 word novel or even longer. I have a huge problem trying to write something under like 18,000 words. Every time I tried to do these like competitions, it was like, okay, I'm at 30,000 words now and I still haven't got started. Like I've only just like finished the intro.
But a 40,000 word novella, 100-page book. That's a good way to get started. To be like that.
That's true. Yeah. That's true. Yeah. The high end of novella.
I do like what you're saying, because it's one of those things of like, do you think Gordon Ramsay is going to look at you right off the street and be like, okay, let's focus on fish today, and I'm going to teach you fish? It's like, dude, at least get to the point where you're like, I know how to make sauces, maybe 5 out of 10. I know how to do X, Y, Z, and then kind of look for your mentor. Because I think what you said is exactly right. Of until you can actually say, yes, I have a completed manuscript, whether it's published or not, but I have a manuscript of a story I wrote, there's a huge difference in the learning curve and being able to step in to that.
Yeah. And writing that first book is going to teach you so much about what you like to do, what you don't like to do, what you did wrong. And like, just from like every writer I've ever talked to, the first chapter to the last chapter is completely different in quality.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And
like, Nico even said, like, the bonus about having a shitty first book is that the next ones will seem so much better.
Yes. Yeah.
So Nico had a wrap-up question for us, and I told him, like, hey, go ahead and start getting your wrap-up questions in. That way we can get on with life, even though I love this.
Yeah.
But she asked, what lit RPG book would you recommend for someone's first, and which of your books would you recommend a new reader start with?
Oh, okay. What would I recommend someone start with? It depends on what people like. If you're a more adult humor sort of thing, I always actually recommend the starting place is Dungeon Crawl Carl. And I tell people, so look, this is the peak of the genre. Everything's downhill from here, but it's still good.
Oh, dude.
However, if I was looking at like someone younger, I think the best starting book is probably Threadbare. Threadbare is it's one of the best written novels out there, in my opinion. It is very much like a traditional fantasy, even though it's a lit RPG. It is a wonderful like first story. Have you not read it?
No, I'm looking it up right now. Threat or Thread?
Thread. So it's a story about a little girl's teddy bear who comes to life and saves the world to rescue his little girl.
Is this by Andrew Seipel?
I think so. I'm terrible with authors' names.
No, okay.
There's like 4 or 5 books out now.
That's what. Okay, yeah. So it has to be this one. Okay. Stuff and Nonsense. That is the first book in the series.
For starting with my stuff, if you're coming from traditional fantasy, I would definitely say start with Oh Great. If you are coming from urban fantasy, I would say start with The Vampire Vincent. Okay. Like, I like First Line of Defense, but it's definitely more niche. So I wouldn't direct people that way.
I loved First Line of Defense.
Yeah.
People need to really pick that up because it was so creative. And I love how in lit RPG, you could really go so many different ways. And having a tower defense system, it was brilliant, dude. I loved it.
Yeah. That actually came from my addiction to a video game.
Oh, I'm sure. Because who did not go through a tower defense like time in their life?
Yeah. So there is this really cool tower defense game called The Tower. It came out about 2.5 years ago now. And it is an inversion of the like tower defense games. So instead of having like multiple towers and you build a maze, you have a single tower and it is a survival game. See how long you can survive. Okay. And yeah, I was playing so much of this game that I was like, this would be really cool in like a book. And I started thinking about like, how would you do this in the book? And it was like, okay, you do it in space, you do it like this, and you have like this station that's protecting like transit junction. I'm like, that's kind of cool. That's like how you do this as like a book. And then I just wrote it and I was like, that was cool. I should edit this and publish this.
It's one of the few books that I plan to re-listen to because I know you and I talked about it in Vegas. When you start to write more, you kind of go through this phase where it's hard for you to listen or read to books and just enjoy them.
Yeah.
And First Line of Defense was one where I was like, wow, I really enjoyed that. But I know I want to re-listen to it and really make sure like I enjoy the whole story.
Yeah.
I would say, for starting with lit RPG books, and I'm very, what do I say? I do not have a big plethora of books to pull from. I would say from an academy standpoint, one of the books I absolutely fell in love with was Brian Norton's Quest Academy Silvers.
Yep.
Wow, just what a beautifully written book. Fucking loved it. I would say from humor, from like just a comedy humor standpoint of Lit RPG, Dungeon Crawler Carl, First Line of Defense, or even The Guy Who Accidentally Started the Apocalypse. I re-listened to that, and God, I was laughing so hard.
The Guy Who I haven't read that. Is it good?
It's did you ever listen or read Expeditionary Force?
Oh yeah.
Okay, it's a Lit RPG version of Expeditionary Force, in my opinion. Because I messaged David, and I really want to do an author chat with him, but I messaged him like, wow, you must have really enjoyed Expeditionary Force. He's like, what are you talking about? I'm like, your AI sounds almost identical to Skippy with how they talk. And I was like, it almost sounds like you copied him. And I was like, he's like, no, I've never even heard of the series. So I was like, dude, well done. So yeah, Paulie and Rory, oh my God, some of the funniest shit ever. So it's definitely worth it. So I would say that. As far as my books, that's hard to say. My fantasy series is very much it's a slow building book series. It's very dark. It's pretty much grimdark. My Lit RPG series, Bloodbath, is straight up grimdark, and it's very much it's been said to be one of the most brutal books in the genre. So if you are okay with very much violence, very much inappropriate things happening, sure, go with that. But I would say probably the book to start of mine would be Golem Master, which is 80,000 words in right now, and hopefully it'll be out soon. And I think it's one of those that people actually love. It's one that I've absolutely loved writing. So yeah.
Oh, cool.
All right, let's see. Writing a memoir of sorts. I've titled it Tower Moment. You're basically describing my life these last few years. The tower just keeps falling. Oh my gosh. Well, Ben, closing remarks, man. I think we've hit 2 hours and 20 minutes. So I think we've covered quite a bit in that time.
This is a short conversation for me. I'm extroverted, so I can keep going.
I know. I just wish we had cigars right now, dude. That was so much fun in Vegas.
Oh, heck yeah. Actually, that would be, I would be totally down to come on like any show all the time. It's like, look, we smoke cigars and we talk about books. And I'd be like, and we film it at the same time. You had me at like smoking cigars and talk about books. I'm good. That'd be so much fun.
I'm just super happy that I actually got to buy you a cigar in Vegas. But then in return, you were like, hey, here, try this cigar. So I was like, oh, Ben gave me a cigar as well. This was awesome. Yep.
It was a lot of fun.
As far as cons, are you going to any cons coming up here where some of your stalkers can meet you at?
Not this year. So last year was the first time I went to the States. There was only 2 cons. I was like kind of interested at that stage because I wanted to try it out. And I found out that traveling to the States is really far when you're doing like a 13 to like 16-hour flight. And that's if you get the short flight. I had the long flight the first time, 33 hours to get to, Colorado Springs. So nothing this year because I'm trying to get more work done. Next year, however, I'll be doing a lot. So I will probably I'll be at Jordan Con. I'll probably be at, what's the other one? Dragon Con, and I'll potentially be at one other con.
Okay. I know I'm planning on Jordan Con in 2025, so we definitely need to make sure this happens.
Sweet. Yep.
Absolutely.
Cool.
All right, guys. Well, wait a minute. Nico is just like, last question. Can the 3 of us meet up and hang out again? Yes, there you go. Jordan Con 2025, Nico. That's where you need to be.
That'd be fun. Yep.
All right, guys. Thanks for tuning in, and we will see you next time.
See ya.
I have a dream, that's all I need. I'll make it happen with some work and belief. Know what I want, so I'll take it on. I'll make mistakes, but mistakes make you strong. Let's break it down for a minute. I want the crown, I'm gon' get it. You hear me loud, man, I'm winning. Yeah, Charlie Sheen will be grinning. These ladies know that I'm sinning, and this is just the beginning. I'm closing in the night inning. There ain't no point in resisting. Living life like a dream, live it right, that's the thing. Every night got a team, I've been tied to the scene. Out on stage, here on screen. Okay, it's a dream, and I pray as a team. One day it'll be me. If I want it, then I'll get it. Head down, don't regret it. Push myself to the limit. If I play it, then I win it. I'm just saying, I'm just living for today. For a minute, I don't stay, I just visit. Have no shame, I admit it. Looking right at me to see if I succeed, to see if I believe. They're looking up to me. They want the best of me now, best of me now, best of me now, best of me. They want the best of me now, best of me now, best of me now, best of me. They want the best of me now. Swear to God, man, I'ma make it soon. Silence all the haters as they see us making moves. I do what I want, so I got nothing to prove. Staying motivated, teaching others what to do. I'm staying focused, my mind is open. They start to notice that I'm in motion. There is no potion, you're not just chosen. It takes devotion to stay composed, man. Never stop, never stop, there ain't no time to fall. Try to live, get it up, you got one life to pop. Thinking big, never small, cause you gotta want it all. When you finally get that call, you get ready, take it on. Need a hand out, I already stand out, starting to advance.